Hello, 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 everybody. So excited. We're going to get started in a minute here. We'll give people a few minutes to get on. It's a little chilly in here, so I'm just putting a little blanket over my legs. So let's see, who have we got here? Okay. I think we're all getting started, getting ready. So while we're waiting, we will ask some questions. We'll talk about, put in the chat where you're from and what the biggest takeaway is that you want to get from this webinar. So I see, Linda, you raised your hand. You have a question? You can unmute.
Yes, it says the chat's disabled.
Oh, really?
So, and I can't see how to turn my camera on for you.
Gotcha. Well, I think I fixed the chat feature, so let's give that a try. See if somebody can pop something.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yay! Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay. Anybody else have any questions before we get started? Dawn from New Jersey, Linda from Dedham. So far we have 2 states representing. Lauren from South Jersey. Nice. Okay, so 7:03. So I'm going to get started. And before I get started, I'll give you the fine print. Okay. The fine print is that I have to say legally that this is not medical advice. This is intended for educational purposes only. Okay. So, got that out of the way. So I'll tell you a little bit about who I am. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jen Goddard. I'm a board certified doctor of natural health, and I started practicing functional medicine back in 2015 after many years of my own personal health journey. So I had a laundry list of medical diagnoses, was on so many medications, and then at 29 years old, my mom was struggling with colorectal cancer. And they had us get our first colonoscopies. So that's where they found that I had tumors all throughout my colon. So it was then that I decided that there's got to be a better way. I was watching what my mom was going through, and if there's anything I can do, to prevent any bit of that, I wanted to do it. So it was actually my sister found a holistic practitioner first, and she said, "Hey, why don't you give it a try?" And I did. And in 3 months, I was off all my meds. I had lost 20 pounds, and the colonoscopies, that I was doing every 6 months. At a certain point, after about 2 years of that, they said, "No, we don't think you have to do this anymore. We think you're good." So I think that was the most exciting part of the whole journey was, yay, no more colonoscopies. So I decided that I wanted others to realize that same power that they had over their health. And I went back to school. And now I have a physical practice in Brewer, Maine, and I work with people virtually all over the US. So that's me. So I thought I'd start out with some fun facts. Did you know that by chewing your veggies, you extract more flavonoids and polyphenols from your food, which means then you're going to release peptides like GLP-1. And that's by the act of chewing it. So that's very different from drinking it, but you've got to chew your food. So that's the power of chewing your food. Another fun fact, bitter flavors from vegetables stimulate your own GLP-1 release. Bitter foods also support your liver health. So you're going to notice a common thread throughout all of this is that something just doesn't fix one thing. When you do it naturally and you work at a foundational level, you're going to see that all things are supported, and something just doesn't do one thing in the system. It does lots of things in the system. So bitter flavors. So that's arugula right there. Another fun fact, the Mediterranean diet improves GLP-1 levels compared to a vegetarian diet. So if you are debating, should I do vegetarian? Should I do Mediterranean? A Mediterranean diet is going to get a bigger impact when it comes to GLP-1, and I'll explain more about why later so that you understand why that is and you can make a good decision for yourself. Another fun fact, I love this photo. Did you know that your digestive tract has taste buds that are similar to your tongue? So that's pretty fascinating when you think about it. We think about our tongue when we think about taste buds, but your digestive tract has those as well. So the one great thing about all of this Ozempic stuff is that the pharmaceutical companies are now paying for research to prove things that we've known clinically for many, many years. And that's just how important these hormone peptides are to all of our functions, not just our blood sugar. It doesn't just impact weight loss, it impacts lots and lots of things. But typically it's the drug companies that have the funds and the money to do these studies. And they typically don't do that unless there's an interest for them and there's a benefit for them. So now that, Ozempic and all of the others have blown up like they have, we're getting a lot more research coming through, and it's showing, like I said, what we've known all along. So what are peptide hormones? So GLP-1 is a peptide hormone, and they're made of small chains of amino acids. Your body produces a wide range of peptide hormones, which circulate in the blood and bind to receptors to target organs and tissues. So what are amino acids? Amino acids come from the protein in our food. And we'll talk about what kinds of proteins and how that matters and all that stuff. But just know that the amino acids are the building blocks and they come from the protein that we eat. So our body makes over 7,000 peptides. Okay, GLP-1 is one. It's one peptide hormone. We make over 7,000 peptides. And some of those impact our hormones, some of them neurotransmitters, some of them growth factors. So they do all kinds of things in the body. And these aren't just random amino acids, okay? They have a specific sequence of information, and it speaks to a specific receptor for a specific function, okay? So when you target that process from a foundational perspective, you support your body in all of these ways. And it's something that you, instead of just doing one thing well, like GLP-1, you are supporting them in a way that you're helping all 7,000 of them. Okay. So I'm a biggest bang for my buck kind of girl. So if I can make changes that impact all of them, well, that's going to be my focus. Okay. So another thing to remember is that when your body makes them naturally, they don't stick around in your body. You never want idle stuff just hanging around, no dead weight, right? So it makes these peptide hormones for that specific function, like I said, and then it clears them out with enzymes. If it needs it again, it knows how to make it again. And we're talking about like minutes, okay? So this process is a very quick process. But with the drug, it's hours to days, okay? So this is something that would never happen naturally in our system. And it reminds me of way back when with the ketone craze, when people would eat a lot of carbohydrates and then they would take ketones. Well, this would never naturally occur in your body. You'd never have high levels of carbohydrates and high levels of ketones at the same time. So when things happen in a way that it's not made for them to happen, it's very confusing to your system. And it's something that we want to avoid as much as possible if we want a good outcome. So it's kind of like a symphony. You're not going to get the same sound if they're each marching to their own beat, so to speak, right? Or if you've got one instrument playing out of the whole 75-piece orchestra, you're not going to have the same outcome. It's going to be very different. And we don't know yet what the long-term impact of manipulating those things are, but we have seen the short-term impact, and that is not good at all. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we go throughout it. So a natural function is very different from these synthetic medications. Those medications are what we call receptor agonists. So that means that they bind to the receptor to force it to produce a biological effect. Okay. So it's kind of like stepping on the gas pedal of your car and not ever taking a break. Okay. That's what happens when we give it a receptor agonist. It forces the body to do something that it wasn't capable, prepared, or prompted to do on its own. And what happens if you do that, eventually your vehicle is going to run out of gas. And then stepping on the gas pedal isn't going to give you any response if you're out of gas. Okay. And then we need more medication, different medications, because your body creates this resistance to it and the body just stops responding. And we see this happen all the time in medicine. We see antibiotic resistance, we see chemo resistance, we see insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is a big one for justifying this medications like these. Insulin is how we get glucose and nutrients into the cell. And when we become insulin resistant and the cell can't get that glucose, the energy, or the nutrients after a while, it just dies. So instead of asking questions like, well, why isn't my body performing this function on its own? Why isn't it doing it the way that I need it to do it, or my body needs it to function? What they do in medicine with medications is they just bypass all that. And when you do that, then what led to the issue is still happening. It's still impacting other functions, okay? It didn't go away. So these are some clips from some great research that show how many conditions are impacted by insulin resistance. There's a Dr. Benjamin Bickman. He's a biomedical scientist. He's a professor at Brigham Young University, and he studies metabolic disorders. And he's really big in this field of research. And he says that when the insulin levels are high, then the body can't burn energy. So what it does is it stores it in our fat cells, and it makes that weight loss so much harder and that weight gain so much quicker. So you'll see in these graphics here some, you can see how many different things are impacted by insulin resistance. Sleep apnea, fatty liver disease, there's, low HDL, which is what they call your good cholesterol. You don't have any bad cholesterol, but that's another topic. So even urinary frequency, things that people do not coincide at all with insulin resistance, cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia, stroke, all of this can be traced back to insulin resistance as being a contributing factor to this. So it's a big deal. And I can understand why, we want to solve the obesity crisis, as they say, but there are other ways besides taking this drug to do it. So here are some more functions that are impacted by insulin resistance: high blood pressure, gout, breast, colon, and prostate cancer, and even skin tags. If you have a lot of skin tags, that's a huge red flag for insulin resistance. PCOS, we saw that in the other one. Some of those we saw in the other one. Heartburn, fatigue, lightheadedness, okay, because it damages that autonomic nervous system. So it definitely makes a big impact. And when we have too much insulin, it's coming from too much glucose, which is coming from one of two things, or maybe both of them. Either our diet or our lifestyle, could be chemicals in our food, because we're following the food pyramid like we were taught, right? We're eating foods that we were told were healthy, but in fact, we know now that they really aren't. And I think we kind of know it then too, but, and then two, it's a lack of communication between your small intestine and your liver, because when that communication happens, it tells the liver, okay, we've gotten enough glucose from our food. We don't need to continue releasing it into the system, which will then lead to this insulin issue. So that's where that focus for the GLP-1 comes in, because that's what they have a drug for. So when they'll give us an answer that they have, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's the only answer. It just means that this is the best solution that they have available to them. But I can tell you, you need all of these digestive communication hormones, not just one of them. So my advice would be to look for ways to support all of them. So how do you know if you have insulin resistance? So doctors can be great at checking glucose levels, but I rarely ever see a doctor that voluntarily checks fasting insulin. If they do, you want it between 1 and 5. But if they don't, like most doctors, then you can take a look at your cholesterol. You can look at your HDL and your triglyceride ratio. So you take your triglyceride number, divide it by your HDL number, and then that gives you your ratio. So in conventional medicine, they say ideal is 2 or less. And typically that has been sort of the regular standard, but the studies, again, now because of all this research that's coming out, they're saying it's probably better if we can keep it below 1.5. So you can see that I love that there's a Mounjaro ad, just a side note, on this website. I thought that was priceless because of the topic. So again, when we look at cholesterol, they they villainized fat and said, oh, don't eat fat, start cutting out the fat in your diet. And we've cut out all these good, healthy fats, and you'll see later why that's a problem. But at the end of the day, what really impacts your cholesterol more than anything is insulin and glucose, and what we're eating and how we're managing our blood sugar is more important. Okay. With your cholesterol levels, they'll say, oh, the lower the better. But we know that if you drop your cholesterol too low, you're going to have a negative impact on these fat soluble nutrients like vitamin A, vitamin D, E, K. All these things are fat soluble nutrients. And when you drop your cholesterol too low, then you have issues in those areas. So we're creating another issue. So the lower is not better, but we want it balanced. So does Ozempic cause stomach problems? Yes, it absolutely does. And 9 times higher risk of pancreatitis, more than 4 times higher risk of bowel obstruction, more than 3 times higher risk of gastroparesis, stomach paralysis. Let me tell you something. I've worked with people with gastroparesis. It is not fun. It is not good. When your stomach stops moving fluid through, or moving food through, it's a really absorption. I mean, there's just a million issues that come from that, and they don't really have an answer for it on how to kick that back into gear and to get it moving again. Hair loss is another big one. We see that all the time. People will come to me because their hair is falling out. What do I do? So there's a lot of risk involved there. This is from Ozempic's website. If you go to ozempic.com and go to prescribing information, it's right on their website. And it talks about, actually in many places, if you look at the package insert, possible thyroid tumors, including cancer, like it's literally plastered everywhere, all over there. So we don't know the long-term impact. We've seen this in the short term, and it's scary enough. So I don't even want to know what's in the future in the next 5-10 years for people that are taking it for long periods of time. So again, our body makes over 7,000 of these peptides. Look at this list here. These are some that are a little less familiar. So I just want you to understand how important all of these are. So like growth hormone, that's your ability to build muscle. Okay. Ghrelin, it controls our hunger. Oxytocin, that's the love hormone. Okay. Calcitonin, that regulates calcium levels in the blood. So think about your immune system, your teeth, your bones. Leptin, that regulates your appetite and your energy. Cholecystokinin, that one is another big one. That tells your gallbladder to contract and release bile. That helps you break down fat and proteins, and it's a digestive support, it's an appetite suppression support. So these are all very, very important things. You can't, and this isn't even close. This is a very small list. This isn't even anywhere in the neighborhood of 7,000. So you can see how they're all really, really important. And I can tell you that if one of them are impaired, like let's say GLP-1, it's not just a GLP-1 issue. It is all of these issue. Okay. That means that they're all struggling. And if that's happening, it would be best to do something that supports the root cause so your body can make all of these, right? So when we do that, we can influence every single one of them with food and nutrients. And if we start focusing at that level, you're going to make a huge impact. So there is a risk of flooding your system with extremely high doses of just one peptide and forcing it to stay in the system. So imagine that guy that's there in the center, poor guy, and you're just hammering him all day long and you're not giving him a break. At some point, that person's going to wave the white flag and just move on. Okay. There has to be a synergistic balance to what's happening in your body. Your body doesn't do things just willy-nilly, and it certainly doesn't do them out of balance. So it's very important that we do it in the way that it's used to working. And it's a lot like our minerals. Supplementing high doses of magnesium, well, now you're going to throw off your calcium. If you do that with zinc, you're going to throw off your copper, and that's very hard to replenish in your system. But people are taking zinc like it's nobody's business, So the peptides are the same way. They thrive with that same synergy. So it doesn't just make or need GLP-1. It makes a whole family of enteroendocrine hormones. And these are all made in the intestinal tract. of your small intestine, and these all work together to help us digest and use our food. We have these receptors, these GLP-1 receptors, we'll talk about them specifically, but we have them in our brain, we have them in our heart, pancreas, all different places. They send signals and messages everywhere. So why would we have those receptors in the brain? Well, it plays a really big role in protecting your brain. It reduces inflammation, memory, all that stuff. So just like all the other peptide hormones, it can have a full body big impact on things like inflammation, insulin sensitivity. You know, all of these functions are important and they all matter. So when you look at this study, for example, it gives you the benefits of GLP-1 and the broader impact that it can have on health and aging. And it can improve your cardiovascular health. It can decrease cellular aging. It helps tackling the cognitive decline associated with aging, diseases that affect the nervous system, helps you live a healthier, longer life. So we know that. So imagine what all 7,000 of them do, right? Now we're getting this information now because we're studying one of them to support the medication. But imagine if that wasn't the case and we were allowing that, you know, to supporting every single one of these, right? So, there. So it tells the cells that you don't have to work anymore. That's what the GLP-1 signals say. It's so symptom-wise in the short term, you are going to feel better if you start taking a drug like this. In certain ways, you know, for those symptoms, you're going to have other symptoms like hair loss and all that, but you know, constipation. But in some of these other symptoms, you are going to feel better in the short term. But those functions were happening as part of a bigger need. Your body didn't just increase your inflammation markers for fun, right? So if this drug comes in and reduces those inflammation markers, all that means is that it's overriding a system, okay? It doesn't just increase your blood pressure in your body because you're, you know, just for fun. It does it because it has to pump fluid further with the same size pump, and that means that it needs more pressure. So lowering that with drugs, regardless of what the function is, that means that that function is going to be sacrificed. That means that the body is not going to be able to do that at all. So think of it like your garden hose. And when the hose is too short and you're trying to water the flowers and they're outside of that, the first thing you do is put your thumb on the hose, right? To increase it, to make that pressure build up, to make it go further. Think of your blood pressure as the same way. You know, if you take your thumb off without actually moving the flower bed closer or getting a longer hose, then the function is going to fail, meaning those flowers are going to die because the water is not going to reach it, okay? And that's what happens when we have brain fog, when we have fatigue, okay? What the symptoms are going to be different for everyone, but it's going to be the same. The concept is the same, okay? That symptom wasn't there for no reason. The symptom was there because your body was struggling in some way. So it's kind of like taking the fire alarm out of a burning building. The building is still on fire. Or think of the firefighter as that response. That's the symptom. That's your body trying to respond to the fire. And we say, oh, no, firefighter, you can go away. Because we pretend that if the firefighter is not there, then we can ignore that and pretend that there isn't a fire there. That's not what happens. That's, you know, your house is still going to burn down in that scenario, right? So that's what things like inflammation are. That's what things like insulin resistance is. It's trying to communicate something to you. It's trying to tell you something's wrong. And if we take out those signals, if we just manipulate the blood work so that, we don't see those markers anymore, it doesn't mean that the house still isn't on fire. It doesn't mean that your house is still not going to burn down. Okay. And these are things that are important, that we should know. What's the long-term impact of not having a firefighter there to fight my fire? What's the long-term impact of just manipulating a number so that everything looks good, but it's still not functioning properly inside? Okay. So you can see how important just one of the peptide hormones are. Imagine if, again, you could support all of them, okay, without any side effects. Instead of forcing your body to do something that it can't support, you're going to now give it all the tools and the resources that it needs to do it naturally, okay? And I witness this firsthand every day clinically. When we change the lifestyle and the foods that people are eating, we don't need to do anything else to activate GLP-1. And the bigger bonus is that all the other peptide hormones improve as well. So this is one of the biggest differences between a holistic approach and a conventional medicine approach, is that now we recognize how every system of the body is important and that they all have to be able to work together to get a good outcome. So another argument is genetics. So recently, pharma has tried to paint the picture that obesity is a genetic issue. So I wanted to touch on that just to clear up any confusion there. The argument there is that if it's genetic, there isn't anything that we can do about it. So here's your drug. Okay. So it gives them it justifies the solution of medication. Okay. But in the holistic world, we know that, and scientifically this has been proven, we know that DNA may load the gun, but we know that epigenetics, meaning the environment of the gene, and that goes back to lifestyle nutrition, that is what pulls the trigger. So you can have a loaded gun lying there, but it's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to kill anybody unless you pull that trigger, right? So that's when it comes to genetics, that's what we want to keep in mind. Your genetics gives us a picture of what could be, not what is. Remember that. It's what could be, not what is. So I do genetic analysis all the time. I'm a great example of this because my genetic analysis says that I would be a diabetic. I would not regulate estrogen. And there was a time when I lived a very different way. And yes, I had PCOS, I had fibroids, I had infertility, I needed hormone replacement therapy. And now that's all gone. Okay. And all I did was change my lifestyle. I didn't take a medication to do it. I was trying medications back then, nothing worked. But now it's gone. So my genes didn't change, but I changed the environment of the cell. So if you want to read more about epigenetics, there's Dr. Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, Dr. Jeff Bland. They're just a few of the many scientists, doctors, researchers that are talking about epigenetics and how that environment impairs, or how that environment of the cell dictates how the gene is going to function. So it's not to say that there isn't ever time for a drug. There are times when drugs can be life-saving. And I like the analogy that one of my mentors uses all the time. He says it's like going to an auto body shop. Your car gets banged up, you go to have it put back together to the auto body shop, right? But the auto body shop is very different from going to driving school. Okay, when you go to driving school, you're going to learn the rules of the road, how the car works, brakes, gas, all that stuff. And maybe you've got a really good one and they even teach you how to take care of the car, like check your tires, follow your maintenance schedule, right? So these things are very different and we need both to coexist to be successful. But we can't go to the auto body shop expecting a driving school. So we're looking for solutions in the wrong places. Our conventional doctors, there's a difference between teaching you how to drive and just trying to put you back together once everything is broken. Okay. So think of your body as the vehicle, using someone in functional medicine, a health coach, whatever level your circumstance requires. That gives you a different set of tools than the body shop is going to give you. Okay. So that's the difference. And like I said, there's a time for both. But the time for the auto body shop hopefully is very few and far between. And the driving school, once you have that foundation, just like everything else, it's going to change the outcome of everything. Okay. So, what we like to teach and what we learn is what I call the return on investment system. So understanding the return on investment when it comes to what you're eating. That's when you really start to understand what nutrients are. And I can promise you it's very different from what you learned probably your whole life. But when we look at return on investment, we ask, what does this food cost our system? Okay. And what do we get as a return? What kind of nutrient return do we get back out of it? So I've been trying to teach my son this lately. He's realizing that he needs to eliminate gluten and dairy from his diet. So he goes to the store and he purchases these packaged food items that say gluten-free or dairy-free. Sometimes they even say organic. But I'm trying to help him to read the label to understand that just because it may even say organic, it may say gluten-free, it may say dairy-free, it doesn't mean that it's healthy. A lot of times, 9 times out of 10, it's just filled with junk, chemicals, preservatives, fillers as other ingredients. Gluten is glue, right? So to replace that, a lot of times they have this carrageenan, which is a carcinogen, and that acts as the glue to hold it together. Organic sugar, still sugar. So hopefully you're starting to get the point. You know, it's understanding return on investment and what things cost the body versus what you're getting out of it is very important to understand to get a better outcome. Bananas are a really good example of a bad ROI. So doctors tell their patients to eat bananas all the time, and it drives me bananas. So I put together this little, because they say, oh, well, eat bananas for the potassium, right? So this is a little chart, and this is from the government website, dietaryguidelines.gov, and it gives you an idea of what are some high sources of potassium. Okay, so beet greens, oh my gosh, you're getting a ton of potassium in there. Look at that. In just a cup of it, a cup of Swiss chard, you're getting 961 milligrams of potassium, so on and so forth. A banana is all the way at the bottom. You're getting 451 milligrams of potassium out of a medium banana versus these other foods and amounts, right? So if we take that and we highlight, okay, these in the yellow, these are really high return on investment. Okay, we're getting a huge bang for our buck, and look at the calorie count, really super low. I would prefer if they had charted carbohydrate count, but they teach calories, and we'll talk about that. But it does give you some sense of return on investment and as far as what it's costing your body. And so you can see, okay, these in the yellow, these are your really high return on investment. So when you look at it that way, a half of a baked potato is only 80 calories, and it would give you 463 milligrams of potassium. That's better than a banana. A banana is 112 calories and would only give you 451 milligrams of potassium. So it just goes to show that it's not always, you know, what we've been taught our whole life to eat and to think. It's very often we have to retrain our brain. We have to learn different information so we can properly identify food, because food is information. We have been taught to reduce it down to calories, and you could have 1,000 calories of very confused, disjointed, useless information, or you could have 1,000 calories of really specific, useful information. And when we give it the right information, it makes what it needs to make. It makes the right decisions. It knows how to function. Did you ever hear that saying? It's not the machine, it's the operator, right? So it's just a matter of giving it what it needs, and it can take it from there when we do that most of the time. But unfortunately, we've never gone to go driving school, right? For this vehicle. Nobody ever taught us these things. So they taught us the food pyramid instead. And here we are, we have an obesity crisis. So, it's kind of like if you know anybody that works on computers, and you probably hear them talk to like lines of code. Our food is the same thing. You know, they can manipulate a label and say, oh, there's no calories, there's no fat. And they can add back in all of these chemical replications of nutrients, okay? But it doesn't have the same lines of code. It doesn't tell the body the same message. If you get a computer update and even just one number of code is missing, that whole system's going to crash, okay? Yet we give our body zillions of harmful and missing code every day when we're eating the foods that we're eating, when we're eating this processed stuff, when we're eating stuff loaded with all of these chemicals and just lack of nutrients. So, you know, our body's pretty resilient, but that resilience is a blessing and a curse, because, you know, just one time of putting the wrong fuel into your car and it's not going to drive. But with our body, we can abuse that resilience until it just stops working. And sometimes that takes decades of misinformation or missing code. And sometimes it takes a generation for that to show up. Sometimes it only takes a few years or maybe even a month, depending on what genetics you started out with and the environment and all that kind of stuff. But so, you know, you just don't know when, but it can guarantee it's going to happen eventually. When our food is processed, it means that it has lots of chemicals in it. And it also means that we've lost a lot of that coding. When it breaks things down for us and our body doesn't break it down, there's lots of coding that goes missing. And our body just doesn't use it the same way. So it's kind of like comparing a shake to eating real food. I get this question all the time. Well, I put everything together in a shake and I ate a really big shake. It's not just eating the right foods that matters. It's also the digestive communication that matters. Okay. So when you drink it, when you're chewing a food, so imagine that plate full of food and all the nutrients that are in it, and imagine all the nutrients that are in that shake. So people load up these shakes, right? You get 30 grams of protein in that shake. You've got a zillion vitamins and minerals in that shake. You've got all of this stuff in that shake. So if you were to take all of those nutrients and convert it and eat it in real food, it would be a ton of food. It would take you a very long time to eat all of those nutrients, okay? So that plate of food might take you a half an hour to eat, right? If you're taking your time and you're eating it, it would probably be much bigger than that to equal what's in that shake, just to give you some reference. So, when that's happening, when you're chewing the food and you're eating it, your body's breaking it down in that way. Okay, your digestion starts here in the mouth. Okay, those digestive enzymes start, your mouth is acidic. It starts releasing the enzymes, it starts breaking down your food. Okay, that's what happens. While you're chewing, those taste buds are sending signals, okay, to those taste buds in the small intestines and saying, okay, this is what's coming, this is what's coming, this is what's coming. These are the enzymes that you have to release. Okay, we've got protein, we need protease, we've got this, so it's sending all of these messages. It's that communication that's happening, okay, down so that everybody's prepared. Everybody else down the line knows exactly what's coming and exactly what's happening. When we don't have that process happen and we just suck down a shake, for example, it's like, imagine it be like opening up your front door one day and having 100 people in black tie affair saying, we're here for our black tie event dinner, and we've all showed up. And you're like, uh-oh, I had no idea y'all were coming. So that's the difference. We miss out on all of that communication. Okay, we don't, when we're chewing our nutrients, when we're activating those flavors are activating our hormone receptors. We've got everybody's talking, everybody's communicating. We get a much different result. Okay, as opposed to the opposite. So if we've intentionally overslowed this process, like when we take Ozempic, that intentionally slows it down because it forces the GLP-1 to stay in the system longer. Well, now we're going to end up with a different issue. Okay, so we don't want it staying in the system too long. We don't want it clearing too quickly. Like when you have people that are running to the bathroom right after they eat, they're definitely not absorbing any nutrients. Okay. Or if we've slowed it down too long and the food's sitting there too long, well, guess what happens now? Now it starts to rot. It starts to putrefy. We know when that happens that it's just a breeding ground for parasites, for candida, for all kinds of bad things to fester and wreak havoc. So this is like Goldilocks. We want it to be just right because all of our other systems rely on it. We need all of those hormone communicators to tell the liver, hey, we've got enough glucose from our food. You don't need to make any more. To tell your pancreas, hey, this is how much insulin I need. It's like the baton race in high school, where each runner is dependent on the others to complete the cycle. Not one of them can do it on its own. So these are really important systems. We used to think that hormones were only in our endocrine system, but now we know that we have endocrine cells everywhere. Okay, this was the endocrine system that we thought it was limited to. But now we know they transport between every cell and they're this huge network of communication. Okay. So like I said before, what's coming, what's happening. So everybody's on the same page so that we're completely prepared for whatever substance is coming our way. So what are some foods that can help support this naturally? Well, polyphenols, flavonoids, basically colorful food, going back to eating the rainbow. I know probably, I don't know, what was it, like a decade ago, that was like really, really popular. It was really, everybody was saying eat the rainbow. So, and that's true. There's a lot of truth to that. So that helps to activate our peptide hormones naturally, eating the rainbow, diversifying our food sources. Okay. What we don't want to do is reduce our food down to just calories. Okay. Because when we do that and we start focusing on calories, we start walking the wrong path. Not all calories are the same. Okay. You can, like I said before, you can have 1,000 calories of junk. You can have 1,000 calories of nutrient dense food. And when you look at some of that information on, calorie restricted diets and how dangerous they are, well, that danger comes in because they're just focusing on the calories. They're not focusing on the nutrients in the food. So that's where you get some risks involved. Like, for example, my sister, she was on Weight Watchers and she would save up all of her points and eat a huge piece of cake. but she would still lose weight. So she would think that she was doing really well. She didn't know any different. They didn't tell her, hey, this is extremely unhealthy. They just told her, focus on the points, focus on the calories, focus on that. Nutrisystem, she did that. She lost 100 pounds doing Nutrisystem, but she didn't want to take any of the supplements. And because the food was so lacking in nutrients, without those supplements to bridge the gap, it didn't end well. She lost her gallbladder. She got really, really sick from that. But hey, you're losing weight. So just because you're losing weight doesn't mean you're losing weight in a healthy way. Getting nutrients as a processed source instead of, again, naturally eating the food, it's going to be missing the code. So you want to ask yourself, what are you chewing? Not drinking. Are you chewing a high nutrient food? Or are you just chewing a lot of food, what we would call food, right? Or are you chewing a lot of nutrients, right? Are you eating not a lot of food, but it's a lot of nutrients, or vice versa? Are you eating a lot of food with next to no nutrients? So they found that while we're the most obese country, we are also the most nutrient deficient country. So it just goes to show that just stuffing something in there, just filling the hole, just getting something in there isn't getting the job done. And we look at those meds like Ozempic, because of how it manipulates those functions, we start getting into that dangerous territory where we're going to become nutrient deficient really fast, because it's making the food that it's telling your body, hey, I'm full longer than I should be, which sounds like a great plan, but that means you're going to eat even less. And most likely, if this is your solution, you're probably not eating as nutrient dense food as you should be to begin with. So now you're really going to become nutrient deficient really quickly. Back to my favorite picture. So back to the taste buds. So another thing that we know that activates GLP-1 naturally are taste receptors. So meaning that when our body tastes certain flavors, like we talked about with the flavonoids and the polyphenols, it activates the communication of those peptide hormones. So again, if you're drinking something in a shake, or if you've got a powder, oh, look at all these nutrients in the powder. Yes, that can there are times when that can be helpful. If someone is extremely ill, cancer, they can't eat, or maybe they have special needs and something is better than nothing. So I'm not saying that there's never a scenario where a shake isn't a good idea. I'm saying that the majority of people are not going to do as well with a shake as they are with eating the food. So chewing the foods, chewing the right foods, that activates everything, those taste buds in your digestive tract, so it knows what's coming. So, and this is a big reason to eliminate artificial sugars. Even though it isn't actually sugar, it stimulates your task 1 receptors, which are your sweet receptors. So your body doesn't know until it's too late that, hey, that's not what's coming. So if you're eating something and it tastes sweet, it doesn't know until it's already sent all the communication, it's already activated all of the functions, it's already said, we've got sugar coming, until it gets there and it's like, crap, this wasn't sugar. What do we do with this now? So again, you're going to get a different impact. So the flavors of your food matters. Even if it is a sugar substitute, it still makes a difference. So more foods, we talked about bitter foods in the beginning. So these are great at activating your GLP-1 naturally. So when we focus so much on converting our foods to something that's salty or something that's sweet, we ended up cutting out a lot of these foods. Okay. And if you're a coffee drinker, like I'm a coffee drinker, and if you ever notice that you're not, at least I do, even if I'm drinking black coffee, I'm not hungry while I'm sipping on the coffee, even if it's just black and there's nothing else in it. And that's because it's bitter. It gives a bitter taste. I love to drink Dandy Blend tea. It's bitter, just like coffee. Again, works really well. So, if you, way back when, the prior generation used to talk about digestive bitters. And some people still take them today because it helps fire up the digestion. It helps get that communication going so that your body's ready for what's going to come its way, so that those 50 surprise guests don't end up at the door, and you had no idea that they're coming. So dandelion greens, green tea, that can be great. That's considered a bitter, so that can do it as well. Bitter melon. In India, they juice bitter melon. In Asia, they make bitter melon stir fries with steak. I've seen it done with eggs. So, you know, there's lots of benefits to things that we take for granted, or, you know, maybe you've never tried bitter melon and you want to give it a try. So we teach you how to eat these foods. And like I said earlier, bitter foods also support the liver. So the liver is always putting that glucose into the bloodstream for an energy source. So unless GLP-1 tells it, hey, we've got enough, you don't need to do anymore, it's going to keep doing that. Okay. And that's why when you're fasting and they take your glucose, it can still be high, because that's all the work that the liver's been doing. It's been doing all of that all along, even though you haven't been eating anything. So, you know, so we really want to make sure that the liver's not doing that work needlessly if we don't need it. Even our ovaries have bitter taste receptors. So where they pick up on polyphenols, flavonoids, and that alters the hormone production in the granulosa, the theca cells. These control our androgen and estrogen balance. All right, this is huge for women with PCOS. This information would have been big for me to know back then. And other hormonal imbalances when I was doing infertility treatments, and they had me on tamoxifen, a breast cancer drug, and they had me on all of these synthetic hormones. You know, I had no idea how powerful this was, and only to find out years later that, hey, all I needed to do is change these things, and I no longer have these issues, and my cycle is completely normal. It's completely regular. And it's upsetting when you've taken drugs like that are very dangerous to your health, and now knowing how simple it could have been. So when we focus on the root cause, you're going to make a much bigger impact, you know, and people say, well, how can what I eat be so powerful? You know, and hopefully you're starting to get the picture that it doesn't just start with a pill or potion. It has to start with this foundational information. Okay. It has to start with your nutrients first. So protein. So we talked about it being the building blocks for a peptide hormone are amino acids, right? So we get those from consuming protein. And so you want an abundance of these if you're going to make hormone peptides. And this is where muscle breakdown comes in, muscle loss comes in when people take these GLP-1 drugs, because if it's pushing on that gas pedal, you have to make GLP-1, and it's constantly pushing on that gas pedal to force your body to do it. And your body's like, this person was never eating enough protein. That's why I wasn't making it to begin with. So what it does is it starts breaking down muscle that you have, your existing muscle, to release these amino acids so it can do what you're forcing it to do, what you're demanding the body to do by taking this drug. Ouch, you know, so then that's why we get these scenarios where there's tons of muscle wasting. Okay. So what kind of protein? Well, we know, thanks to Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, she did a lot of research here, and we know that your body doesn't use plant protein and animal protein the same way. One of the things that are big things that are different is the bioavailability. So plant-based protein has a bioavailability of 40 to 60%. Animal-based proteins have a bioavailability of around 95%. That's a big difference. Again, big bang for your buck. So if you're eating 30 grams of chicken, for example, it's going to be very different from eating 30 grams of plant protein. Okay. The other thing is the types of amino acids. Animal-based proteins are rich in lysine, methionine, leucine. Plant-based proteins are much lower in these amino acids, and they don't have full amino acid profile foods. So, and ideally that's what you want. So that insulin specialist that we talked about earlier, Dr. Benjamin Bickman, he's also really big. He's shown a lot of research on this too, on how much more animal protein will activate that GLP-1, whereas plant protein, when they've done the research, it just doesn't activate those hormones in the same way. So if you are on it or considering it, that's something to think about. But if you want to activate it naturally, get your protein intake, your animal protein intake nice and high. Most people, almost every single person I talk to is deficient in protein. Fats. He also found fats to play a big role. Animal protein is the number one impactor. Fats are your next one. So good grass-fed raw butter. It has nutrients that no other food has. This is something that's really important. Grass-fed lard. When it comes to like the olive oil and the avocado oil, just keep in mind your temperatures. So with olive oil, if you're using it as a dressing, then olive oil is a great choice. If you're using it, if you're cooking with it, then avocado oil is a better choice because it can withstand those higher temperatures and without breaking down into a trans fat. So fruits and vegetables, they will also do it. Some do, some don't, but the determining factor is your return on investment. Okay, so you're not getting as big of a bang for your buck. Like I talked about with the veggies, if they're your bitter vegetables, yes, your bitter vegetables are going to activate it. All those cruciferous ones, your arugula, all that stuff, that's going to activate it. But again, you're not going to get as much of an impact as you are from your protein, your fats. However, they're all important. So when you look at your plate, align your plate appropriately. Okay. Supplements and support. Everyone and their mother, I feel like, is coming out with a GLP-1 support. They're probably all very, very good, but if you're doing those supports and you're not addressing these foundational issues, you're not going to get the same result. If you are, Jen, I've got this all on point. We're dealing with all of these things and they're all working for me and I want to take it to the next level. I want to go a little faster, a little harder, and you want to bring in these GLP-1 supplementation. That's fabulous. The more people at the party, right? But if you try to do it without doing these other things, you're not going to get the same impact. All right. The supplements mean in addition to, not in place of. Okay, so when you've done all the things and you want to consider that or add that back in, you're going to get much more. You're spending this important money on these things and you want to get the most out of it. So the best way to do that is to have all of these other things in check and supported first. So summary, there is a price for every medication, even over-the-counter medications, okay? Turning away the fireman does not put out the fire. We only turn off the response. So remember that. If we work at a foundation level, we'll support all 7,000 of these peptides instead of just one. Pay close attention to your eating window. Avoid snacking. Eat colorful foods. Vary your foods. I'm running out of time, so I'm trying to go fast. Sorry about that. Incorporate healthy fats at each meal. Keep your animal protein at a minimum of 100 grams a day. That's the minimum. That's not even the ideal. That's the minimum. Have something bitter at every meal. Use your spices for this. Look in your spice, bay leaves, celery seed, fenugreek, oregano, marjoram, thyme, mustard, turmeric. These are all great activators. These are great bitter activators that you just think of them as extra, that you can add on and really pile it on to make it even more impactful. Between your meals, you can sip on some Swiss water decaf coffee, some green tea, some dandy blend tea, put a bay leaf in hot water. Yeah, Linda says she loves fenugreek. Isn't it great? You can just boil, make a hot cup of water and stick a bay leaf in it and sip on that. It's great. And stay hydrated between your meals. You don't want to be drinking lots of liquids, water, especially not ice cold water like they give you at the restaurant when you eat your meals. So you want to stay hydrated outside of that and focus on nutrient dense, high return on investment foods. And that's really going to serve you well. And if you want more help, here's my contact information. If you're not familiar with my work or who I am or aren't working with me yet, and you want more help, feel free to reach out to me. You can go on my website. You can book a free 15-minute call on there, and you can call that number as well, the 207 number. You can email us, and I'll do a free 15-minute call. And if you want to talk about your situation and what you would find helpful and how what other supports you might need to incorporate into your situation to help you get the best results. So I hope you all found that helpful. I don't know why this is moving around on me. Anyway, hope you found that helpful. I'm excited to have you all start activating your GLP-1 naturally. And hopefully we can make a bigger impact in a better way, okay, without all of the side effects and all the needless stuff. So if you have questions, take a picture or screenshot of that, of my contact info. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for being here. Have a good night.